And we're live. I'll give you an extra 4 hours. No, but yeah. Here's to hoping the storms aren't too bad tomorrow.
Hey everybody, and good morning. This is Anne. Welcome to Reaper Pro Tips. It is a morning, okay, with a capital M. I don't know how the rest of you are doing. Hey, everybody. Hey, Nomad Zeke, and Cornico, and Freestyle, and Threads of Fate, and Chibi Boots, and Mistim, and Margaret, and Stephanie, and Twisted Homa. Hello, good morning. Yeah, it's one of those mornings where, like, you have a dog catastrophe or something, or you have just like stuff that delays you, and then that proceeds to snowball and eats up your entire morning, and you don't know who you are, where you are, you have inadequate caffeine. You have to come up with a painting topic off the top of your head because you can't find your dice dudes at the last minute. It's that kind of morning. Hello, good morning. Well, I guess we can still call it a good morning because it's still beautiful outside. It's still gonna be like 75 degrees and sunny here today. How's that, Justin? That's good golf weather, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
Well, minus the hail, but
minus.
yeah.
Oh yeah, well you had, yeah, exactly. Well, you, it might not be 75 and sunny where you are. I'm not sure what the weather is in Texas these days.
I
Monday
mean,
part
it
two.
is sunny and kind of nice now. It just wasn't this morning at
Yes.
all. Actually,
Yeah.
maybe it's overcast again.
Yeah. Yeah. It is Monday part two. You are exactly right. As far as I'm concerned, Miss Dimp, it is Monday. It's just like April is now on its 427th day. Yeah, Monday is now on its second day at least. So this is just horrible, right? Eventually, we'll all be stuck. It'll be like Groundhog Day, except it'll always be April and always Monday. Hey, Coobs. Hey, Wet Toast. I have not seen you before, Wet Toast, but I like your name. Wet Toast is damp. At least damp, perhaps sodden. I mean, you could come up with all sorts of cool synonyms for wet, right? Alrighty. Am I super quiet? I hope not. I didn't adjust my volume or anything. I may be talking slightly. I was facing kind of away from my mic. My mic may have moved a little bit. Let me make sure that I'm. If I'm facing my mic, are we good? Yeah,
Sounds
Bill.
great to me.
Okay, good. Yeah, Bill. I did move. This is the California Digs. This is a painting behind me that my boyfriend purchased. It actually has like the San Francisco hills on it. It's actually a very nice painting. I'm gonna replace it with probably my Elmore print, my signed Elmore print that I have. Once we can get to a framing shop, if any are even open. You know how it goes now, right? It's like you need to do things, but sometimes you cannot always do things. So for now, we have the California Hills behind me, and not Larry Elmore's companion set basic D&D box art cover. But eventually we'll be on theme, I swear. But yeah, okay, so guys, since I couldn't find my dice dudes, although this is the great irony of Tuesdays that are actually Mondays, right? Is that after I had decided not to do dice dudes because I couldn't find them, I noticed a little bag, and of course, 2 seconds before we started stream, I found my dice dudes. So we shall work on like dice dudes at some point, perhaps on Wednesday and Thursday, and maybe even Friday. I don't know. I kind of want to do swirly patterns on the dice dudes and see if we can get it to work. Good morning, Daffodweir. Yay. Stormy gray day. Aw, I'm sorry, Karnika. Although I like rain, and I'm not going to get any rain this summer. Actually, we looked up the metrics for Northern California, and pretty much in May, they stop getting rain, and they don't get any until like October or November. And then, like, all winter, the sky opens. Yes, yes. Yeah. The move went. I mean, it was crazy, right? It's moving during the pandemic. It's like insane. 3 days of driving across the country. But my movers actually delivered all my stuff, and they did a great job. I used United. I went with a big, reputable mover, and although it was expensive, all of my stuff arrived intact, and only one thing had one tiny piece break off. out of all of the stuff that I shipped, which was impressive. And the thing that had a piece break off was one of my Overwatch statues, and I would expect it, right? Because that's fragile, and I chose to ship it and not carry it in the car because I was out of space. So all in all, that part of the move was actually great. The weirdest part of that was just that they didn't get there until after I got here, so it was odd being, kind of living out of my suitcase for a bit, even though I was actually living here. So yeah, but now everything, I've got like 4 boxes of books that I need to unpack, and then everything is done. And I can't tell you how good that feels. Like, I'm still forgetting where I put things. Like when you reorganize your kitchen after you move and you're like, where did I put that pot? That kind of thing. I'm still having those moments. But, and where did I put my dice, guys, right? But actually, in general, here, I am more organized than I was at home. Because having done the streaming thing and having done, and been doing commission work and stuff, I had an incentive to organize my workspace in a way that made sense to me, and that I could find everything and put hands on everything pretty much from my desk. So all in all, I think that, I'm actually in a better place now once I get used to everything's new configuration. I can have some of your rain? Yeah. All right. You have a list of things to do before watching Anne. That's really good. Good. Reward yourself for doing things. That's great. Yeah, I busted butt, Bill. When I essentially, the movers came on Tuesday, and by Sunday, like, they came in the afternoon on Tuesday and finished up. And then by Sunday, I would say 95% set. Like, I really busted butt because I just did not want to be in this middle ground state of, discombobulation from moving, right? You don't want to be there. And I had to stream, like, ASAP. So, like, I knew I needed to be more or less set by Monday so that I could start streaming again. So, yeah, it was a big incentive for me I did nothing. I did, like, 8 to 10 hours a day. All I was doing was unpacking and organizing. So it was like, it's just crazy. I got lots of exercise. My Fitbit was super happy because apparently it like equates to walking like 5 miles to sit and unpack all day, or stand and unpack all day, I should say. Hey, Janky, good to see you. Good evening from the UK indeed. Oh, it's National Blueberry Pie Day? Wow, I'm so sad that I don't have blueberries. Although I do actually have finally some gluten-free flour mix coming in the mail, so that I can start baking again. So much for losing weight, right? At least the weather is nice, so I can try to walk it off. I'm going to put my little dice dudes over there so I can remember. Oh, I wanted to ask you guys, like, if we do swirly dice, like if we try to do marble dice pattern on these dice, what colors should we do? What color should we do? Tell me, chat. Tell me what color we should do for tomorrow's Dice Guy extravaganza. Like, I've got a bard, and I've got the bard and the archer, because those are my 2 favorite ones. So we have a D6 and a D8. So what colors should we do our swirlies on our dice guys? Red and gold is a great one. Black and yellow would be hard. Black and yellow or black and pink. I like both of those. I like all of that. Red and gold. I think I'm definitely going to go for red and gold because I don't usually do wet blending with metallics and regular colors. And that would be a great one, actually. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. That was a fantastic suggestion. Because normally when I do wet blend swirly patterns, I'm doing marble, right? So I don't usually use metallics, but this would be a great opportunity to experiment with that. So I'm going to make a note of that right now. And then the other one we can choose down the road. I know you guys like purple and gold, green and gold. Green and gold is really easy. Purple and gold would be harder, right? Because you don't actually want it to necessarily blend. So let's do red and gold. I also like the black and pink suggestion. Black and pink. Purple and gold. There we go. All right, so we'll try those. We'll try at least the red and gold. Probably, maybe on the bard. He's flashy, right? Mr. Bard should be red and gold. But for today, we're going to talk about blue because I've got the blues because it's a Monday. So, all right. Hydro dipping for marble. Yeah, I mean, you could do it that way, right? Please do green with gold swirls, but it's so easy because green and gold naturally go together. But you can use the red and gold swirls technique on the green and gold swirls. I promise you. Maybe we'll try both. Maybe we'll have time for both. We'll see what I can do. All right, let's go to minicam here and get us on our minicam. Get us on our light. There we go. Now we've got a nice, now I'm going to get it up to about where I want it to be during the painting, get you in focus. We're actually going to use a much darker blue, and we're going to use this side of the cape. And we're going to start with cyan. Now, you have to pet your dog because no one else is. Oh, my dog totally feels that. Wet toast. My dog is like that all the time. Yeah, this is a neat mini. My biggest problem, like having to figure out what I was doing on it kind of at the last minute, was just that there's so much on it, right? And you're just like, arg, there's so many things. What things do I pick? So I'm going to do a quick base coat with my cyan blue. Now, the thing to remember about blue can actually be very difficult to highlight. Not so much to shade. And the reason is blue is naturally a dark pigment, right? Your basic blue pigment, here, let me show you. Where's my clear blue? Clear blue, where are you? Well, I got my phthalo. My clear blue is around here somewhere. It's hiding. But the natural pigment of blue is very dark. It is the darkest pigment other than black and umbers that are available, essentially. So this is the natural state. This is a clear. So it's a natural state of your blue pigment, and it is quite dark. Oh, there's my clear blue. And there's the other one. And it's very, very dark. So your blue pigments are some of the darkest pigments. But they're also some of the most transparent pigments, right? Blue doesn't cover very well, especially if you thin it just a little bit. So what that means is that when you add white to blue, in order to highlight it, you could get brush strokes super easy and super fast. Like you cannot, getting a smooth blend with blue can be a pain in the butt. So how we get around that is we start with a blue that is slightly lighter. It's still dark, but slightly lighter. This is cyan blue. It's one of my favorites. It's 9117. It's a nice blue. If you want a good medium blue that's, not very light, that is vibrant, but still covers well. You can see it's covering quite well over this light blue gray that I've got down. Then cyan blue is something that maybe you could mess with. The other nice thing about cyan is that as per its name, it's got a greenish cast to it. It's not a purpley blue. And because of that, I'm just going to highlight right down there. Do that right down there. All right. And because of that, you can highlight it with awesome teals and turquoise. So you could highlight it with a greenish pale blue, like Merid Blue from Pathfinder, which is a very pretty pale blue with a bit of green in it. Or you can go all the way, which I like to do actually, and go up to something like mint green or phantom glow. Both of these are great, and I'll probably use them actually in this. What I tend to do is go up to like surf aqua first. Let's see if I can find my surf aqua. I did not immediately see it when opening my thing. This is a problem because I love my surf aqua. If I have to mix everything this morning, the day is definitely a Monday, you guys. Yeah, like if that's the way that today is gonna roll. There we go. Yay, surf aqua. Okay, so this is the magic ingredient of highlighting blues with kind of greenish colors, of warm highlights on blue, which you get, right? The sun hits blue and it does tend to warm it up. So this is your kind of translator color because it's halfway between a blue and a green, as you can see. So it's a great way to start on highlights and then go up even to mint. Mint is lighter. There you go. So that's actually that creates a really nice blend to do blue with. And we will show you how to do that. And it minimizes, starting with the, sorry, not oceanic. Or did I start with, I thought I started with cyan. Yeah, I did. Cyan blue. Sorry, oceanic confused me. So this is a nice range. You could also use dragon blue here. You could also use oceanic blue here. Any of those blues will work. And since your cyan and your oceanic and your dragon all have a bit of white in them, you avoid the brush strokes problem. So you avoid the fact that you're trying to put an opaque paint on top of a transparent paint. And actually, maybe I'll grab some clear blue and show you guys what I mean by having trouble blending. Maybe I'll show you how horrible it can be. Yes. Yeah, ice dragon. The blues are, like I said, they can be a pain in the butt because shading them isn't so difficult because they're a naturally dark pigment. And I'll show you actually a couple different colors to shade with as well. But highlighting them can be a real pain in the tuchus. Let me I'll grab my clear phthalo because it's the worst offender. And I'll put down a little bit of it. Let's see. Come here, phthalo blue. This is probably the most transparent blue pigment, is clear phthalo. In this particular, and it varies by brand. I mean, paint companies are always trying to get better coverage out of weak coverage colors. So you can see right away how clear that is, right? You can see the brush strokes. So blue, not a great coverage color. So I'm going to let that dry. We'll put another layer on it in a little bit while we're working with this. And then we'll show you how hard it can be, what I mean about brush strokes. All right, so our cyan is drying very nicely, so let's mix up a highlight for it. Actually, let's talk about shadows. So you don't have to shade blue with blue, and in fact, it tends to look a little wrong if you do. Saturated shadows, although it's kind of what we teach, right? We have triads. So cyan blue is actually the highlight in a triad that includes brilliant blue and Ritterlich blue. And Ritterlich is one of my favorite colors because it's our equivalent for Prussian blue, which is a beautiful dark blue. Very, very dark navy, but it's still vibrant. And you can certainly shade with that. Like, that's kind of your basics. When we do the triads for MSP Core, it's training wheels, right? Is we want to give you guys, when you're not comfortable with mixing, when you're not sure how to do it, we want to give you a good starting point. And then once you get comfortable with shading and highlighting, then you can start looking at other ways to do it. So starting with Ritterlich or using this triad is a good idea, but you can get even more realistic effects if that's what you're going for by using other colors or just more interesting ones. Here I have, this is a Reaper color, but this is a normal color. So I tend to, if I'm doing realistic shadows, I actually tend to mix walnut brown in a lot these days. It gives you kind of a gray tone, a little bit of a warm gray tone to whatever color you're working with, and it tends to look really natural. If you go outside and you kind of look at the shadows on people's clothing and their faces and everything, or even your hands just when you're sitting in the office, your shadows tend to go a little gray. So rather than just adding in black, which is just adds kind of an ashy and can add a greenish tone to things, adding in a really dark brown can give you a more natural shadow and that not go quite so green. You sometimes have to step that up a bit with yellows, but you know, it varies. I could go into that quite a bit. I mean, if you know light theory, you know that often in shadows outside on a sunny day, your shadows actually have blue in them, and that's the reason for that is the sky reflection. So, you know, that's going cooler with your shadows, like, for example, going black indigo. Not a bad idea. But in general, for more natural shadows, instead of going with a darker version of the color that you're using, you can try to mix a little bit of walnut in there if you are feeling confident. So let's show you how these guys look. Let's do some shadows. Then we'll do some highlights. Color wheel, not so much. It's kind of soccer hip. Essentially, if you have like a big color wheel with lots of like halftones, or even better if you kind of just can make a swatch. Like if you've got a color, let's see, probably your best bet is going to be to take the picture of the thing that you need, like the color you need, the tone you need. Either print out a color swatch of it or take a photo of it. Photo's probably better. And then take it to the game store and just compare various paints. Or show it to a game store employee and say, hey, what paint is closest to this? Reaper used to have a thing called the Power Palette that you could just put a photo up in it and it would give you suggestions for closest colors. But because our swatches were formulated for printers, it wasn't the most accurate thing. And I'm not sure if it's still out there. Eyeballs are probably better. The other thing you could do is put up a picture on our Facebook group and say, hey guys, I need to know what MSP core color would be closest to this. And I bet our community would be able to help you really easily with that because our people are really helpful. So I'm going to put 2 drops of walnut down with 4 drops of cyan. Nightmare Black is really dark, and it is just black and blue Nomad Zeke. It would give you, I mean, it would work, right? It's all what you're going for. Any darker color can work, but are you looking for a natural shadow, or are you looking for like putting color in your shadows, or what are you aiming for, right? We're all taught that the answer to like shading, a blue is dark blue, but that's really not true. If you take a blue shirt and you take it outside and you look at it, the shadows are actually more gray and desaturated. They're not really bright. So you have to decide kind of what you're going for. Are you going for more naturalistic, or are you just, going for more kind of cartoony? And on a 28 millimeter, it doesn't matter so much, I find. it's not because you don't have a lot of area that your shadows take up on a very small model. You don't have to worry about it as much. But something larger, you may notice that it looks better if you desaturate your shadows a little. So just to show you what a pretty color. Yeah, there are phone apps. So the problem with phone apps and cameras and all of that is you want to make sure that the phone app swatch is indeed the color that you're dealing with, like, or the color on your photo is the color that you want, right? Because the phone will take into account like ambient light. It's going to shift the color a little bit. We all know that sometimes when we take pictures of our miniatures, they show up more yellow or more blue than they are. So just make sure that you're actually working from an accurate photo of what you're looking for.
Right, and actually, from a photography standpoint, different sensors from different companies have better quality color science. So
Mm-hmm.
the accuracy of color can absolutely vary very, 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 very much. Um, to the degree that, for instance, like I talked about how Canon is known on the market as having some of the best color science available. They just don't have the sharpest of sensors when it comes to like clarity of the photo like Nikon does. So, and as far as phone cameras go, I mean, if it's an older camera, there's a decent possibility that the color representation you get is not actually what you want. It just there's a lot of variables
So I'll
there.
show you guys
So
that
just
color.
as long as you yeah, as long as you go into it managing your expectations, then it should be pretty reasonable, I think. Also, the power palette is supposed to return. I just don't know
Yeah, the
when.
priority list, Nomad Zeke.
That's
Nomad Zeke has
yeah.
it in one. It's like the priority. Anyway, I wanted to say soccer hip. Yeah, I mean, I was going to demo as I paint this in, I can demonstrate. So let's say you painted a shadow in and you're like, oh no, I got it on that, brighter area that I didn't want a shadow on. Then you use, yes, you don't even have to thin your color very much with the blues because they are naturally translucent. So right here, I've probably got a mixture of about 2-to-1 paint to water. So it's still, if you look at it how it goes on my palette, it's still pretty solid, right? Just has a little bit of transparency to it. Then I can essentially paint that over the demarcation between my shadow. Now I'm going to get a little bit of a wet blend probably. Oh, and I need my glasses. I cannot see anything without my reading glasses.
Also freestyle. That was about seven varies, I believe.
Very,
Anne was
very,
counting
very,
for me.
yes, very, 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 very suspect. So yeah, so you can continue essentially to paint thin blue over that demarcation to blend the two in. So this
Did
color, go ahead, Justin.
did you answer Soccer Hips question by chance?
Which one?
Um, I believe they ask, would they be able to lighten a too dark area with
Yeah,
layering?
that's what
Very,
I'm
very
doing.
limited.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so essentially, now if you wanted to lighten the whole thing, like if you feel that this went too dark for you, and it's too dramatic, you could absolutely paint thinned layers over the whole thing, and that's usually called glazing, depending on the consistency. Let me blend this sucker in, and then I can show you how to glaze. So the reason, by the way, that I'm going sideways across this is that if you use an up and down brush stroke, all you're going to see is that big stripe of dark. If you come at it from the side, you can confuse the eye and make a better blend. If you never, when you've got a long surface, never go in tune with that surface with your brush stroke. Always go across it. You want to disrupt this shape. You want to disrupt the outline so that it doesn't just look like stripes of shadow. Because, it's impossible to get perfect blends. Like, you can't get an airbrush blend with a brush, but it is absolutely possible to make a nice blend that looks pleasant to the eye that the eye can't tell is blended. So this is very dark. Let's see here. Yeah, phones have good cameras nowadays. Just be sure that, obviously when you take a picture of something, you're like, I need a match for this blue. Make sure to compare your phone shot to the actual model or color before you tromp off to try to find a match for it. Because obviously if your phone camera shot is not quite in tune, like it's a little too green, it's a little too yellow, it's a little too dark or bright, then you're going to be using a flawed reference when you go to try to compare it to colors. So just be aware that your phone can absolutely do that. And a little difference can make a big difference on a model depending on what you're painting. So, all right, so there we go. So we've got a blend there. I blended it in, but it's still showing up very, very dark. So let us do a glaze. So we're gonna wait for it to dry, which won't take long. because I'm blowing on it, and also I can mix my glaze while we do that. So for a glaze, for very thin layers of paint, soccer, you want to put a drop of your already thin paint, and then I usually will just add a drop of water or a brush full of water in this case. For a glaze is actually thinner than a wash. Washes are what you add to bring out detail when you just put a dark color over your lighter colors. And a glaze is more, like you say, it's to filter out and to make all of this kind of shift upward in hue. So I want it pretty thin. Here, since I've only done one shadow, I could actually leave it pretty thick. I just don't want brush strokes. So let's see. So this is probably about, I want to say it's about a 1-to-1, maybe a 2-to-1 water to paint. And when you do it, you want to cover the whole area that you're trying to bring up pretty quickly because you want a nice even coat, and you do not want it to pool at all. You're not trying to leave more in the cracks. So I'm just going to use my brush, paint over my entire shadow. And the other nice thing about this is that not only will it lighten that dark shadow, but it will also blend in any brush strokes that I have left over from blending the sides. Depends. On small areas like faces, maybe only like 2 to 3 soccer hit, probably about 3. Thank you. But on big faces, like I like to paint busts a lot, and they're very large. Or like a face like hers, because she's more like a 54mm model. I could easily go up 5 highlights if I was doing it, and wanted a lot of drama. But I would say on my average face, 3 is a good benchmark for small models, because you're just dealing with such a small area. You don't need a lot to make the features come out nicely. So that's blending in, and you can see how it's gotten lighter, right? It's still pretty dark on the camera, but it's definitely looking lighter. Yeah, yep, I know. I have Mariko, actually, I think. And now that I've got one of their models. David bought it for me for our anniversary, actually, or my birthday. I can't remember. He gets me presents. He's so nice. Maybe it was Christmas. But yeah, now I was sad that we were just on their website and seeing that they were discontinuing business, and really sad because he's got a really nice elf bust from them, and I've got a really cool one, and we really like their sculpts. Yeah, Margaret, I did that on did I do that on a toolbox, Justin? No, I did it for my Patreon, actually, I think, on this one. But I might have started it on stream. Gosh, I don't remember. Everything is crossing. I do know that I did a thing on my Patreon, Margaret, so you might go look for it. I think it's freehand on bigger models. I'm trying to remember. All right, so you don't need to do just one glaze. If it's not quite where you want it, you can do a second glaze on this, as long as it's dry. And the minute it dries, you don't want to touch it when it's drying for a glaze, because you can easily leave brush marks or strip paint up. So let's do another glaze. And you always want to kind of err on the side of less glaze and then just do multiples rather than doing one gigantic glaze. If you do one gigantic glaze that's thick, you risk wiping everything out. Whereas if you're using a thinner glaze, you can kind of tune it and make sure it's where you want it. Yeah, I thought I started it on a toolbox, and I might have actually done a step-by-step for my... Actually, this one, I was sure that I did this on... Oh, well. I'll look for it. I need to do. You can actually Patreon just added a search index. You should be able to search for freehand or by one of my tags, and this should be under freehand. So if you search for posts with freehand, you might be able to find it that way, Margaret. I thought I did a PDF that was step by step on this. I was pretty sure after I did it on stream that I went and did that. Yeah. So it could have been both. I could have done a crossover, because although it's fun to do it on stream, my Patreon, this big thing is giving you guys PDFs so that you have a handy step-by-step, so you don't have to rewatch. You can just refer to the pictures. So I think I might have done both. Anyway, now that I've mentioned it 50 times, let's just say my Patreon is patreon.com/paintingbig. I actually just put up a thing, or about to put up a thing on brunette hair that I just finished yesterday. I'm very happy with it. And then... I've got some other content coming this month also, just to finish up the end of the month. I kind of got behind this month because of the moving. All right, so we have now blended in this. Actually, it's pretty nice and blendy. I can still see a really dark area in the center. And if I wanted to, I could just try to tune that just by taking it down. I could do a stripe of blue just to try to get that. Now you notice as I'm brushing this glaze over, I'm going the opposite direction of my blending strokes here, and that's intentional. I'm not going to leave brush strokes really, but I do believe in kind of confusing the visual issue as much as I can. So I'll alternate direction of brush strokes if I'm trying to blend something in. You can also just do this when you're highlighting by using cross-hatching instead of a particular directional brush stroke. I do want to share my shadow color just to show you guys how pretty this is. This is cyan blue plus walnut brown, and it makes a gorgeous dark blue that's actually still has a lot of blue in it, as you can see. It's got a little bit of a greenish hint because of the other pigments in the walnut, but it is a beautiful shadow color. We could also do kind of a half and half if we wanted less dark shadows. If we decided we didn't want to glaze everything, we could do a half and half and get a beautiful dark blue here too. And it's a little bit complicated because it's got some brown in it, right? It's not just mixing blue and black. So it does give us that more complex shadow, more muted shadow that we're looking for if we don't want to have just a dark blue shadow. But that's a very pretty color as well. So play around. I mean, Corporea, Erin Hartwell, uses a mixture of dragon blue and walnut brown as her shadow color for a lot of stuff. So it's very close to this little bit more blue. And I agree with her. It's a great shadow color. So that's one. It actually was put out at ReaperCon as Corporeal Shadow. So if we do that ReaperCon paint set, you guys will get that, hypothetically. That I don't know where that is on the list of stuff that Reaper needs to do. So pardon me, I'm going to adjust my camera just a tad. There we go. All right, so shading. So that's what I would tend to do. Let's show you Black Indigo. Black Indigo is much more straightforward. It's not going to mute it very much. It's got some purple in it. It's got a lot of black in it. It's actually would be shading with a dark purple, would be what it would count as. Since it's an indigo, it does have some blue. I'll show you what the difference in that color. Let's see if I can get it thinned down. When you thin down a paint, you can see the pigments in it a lot better. So if you ever wonder, you know, what colors are really in your really dark colors, try adding a touch of white or thinning them down and looking at them through a white palette. So you can see that this is very purple compared to this. So it would give you a different sort of shadow. Mixed with cyan blue, it would go actually a little bit muted because there's greenish color in this. So the fact that you're going purplish here will not give you a very bright result. So that also is kind of a pretty color, and it's not as greenish as this is. That would be okay to use as a shadow color for this project because we're going to warm with our highlights, and by all means we can go cooler with our shadows. So by warm, we're going closer to like yellow in this case, and so going away from yellow, going cooler toward purple would be a cooler color. All right. Well, honestly, Soccer Hip, that's why I was talking about the walnut brown. I mix walnut brown with almost everything now for to create a shadow color. Just a tiny touch of it will usually slide a color darker without totally washing it out. It's not, you never want to use black for that, not ever. Black pigment tends to make a lot of colors ashy, or it will interact with some colors and create different colors, like it will turn yellow-green. And that's probably the one thing that I wouldn't use walnut to shade, yellow. So it's like yellow is weird, and you want to probably use an orangey brown or a tan or something to shade it. But I'm just going to block in a shadow here with the indigo to show you the difference. But in general, I tend to reach for walnut or black and brown and mix that with my base color if it's not too light. The lighter your base color, the more that gets kind of touchy because then you've got a lot of white in lighter colors, and that will start to gray if you use a dark color that has a lot of black in it, like walnut. So sadly, there is no way to really explain it in one simple tip. I do often recommend for people getting started with color, Betty Edwards' book, Color. It's kind of a workbook. She has exercises in there to learn how color interacts and how to look at color and how it changes, and various just a very good foundational book on thinking about color and color theory. So Betty Edwards is the author, and the name of the book is Color, and it's got a subtitle, but I just don't remember. But it is a workbook. She has fun exercises, It's a good way to kind of play with color and get more comfortable with it. She also goes into a little bit of the cultural meanings behind different colors, which is really fascinating because, you know, some cultures white is good and some colors it's death, and some colors red means something completely different than what it means to us. And, you know, and blue can even be a different meaning for different cultures. So if you're painting models that are kind of coming from different fantasy cultures or from painting historical pieces, it can be very interesting to read about that stuff. So I like Betty Edwards a lot. I like her. I love that book. That's one of the 2 books I recommend for learning to think about color. And the other one that I recommend is James Gurney, who did Dinotopia, has a book called Color and Light. And I would say he's definitely coming at it from a slightly more advanced perspective. So I would actually look at Betty's book first. But once you've got that, then look at James's book, because it's endlessly fascinating, and you will be wowed both at his degree of skill with a brush and with light and color, and he'll also get you thinking about it more, and maybe get you trying some things that you hadn't thought about before. So those are the 2 books on color that I recommend. There are many other books on color out there. I usually don't recommend them, just because a lot of times you'll get somebody's like personal theory about color instead of just an objective look at it. And personal systems are great, and, you know, definitely look at them, but take them with a grain of salt. All right, so here we can see. So the black indigo mixture went a little purple, and it also is not nearly as dark as our walnut mixture, because it's more like our 75% cyan and 25% walnut, and it's like over here. So that is a pretty good shadow for this color, I would say. You can also use soccer. Let's see here. Yeah, soccer. Sorry, you missed that. I was talking about that at the beginning. Yeah, we make triads in the core MSP line. There are triads, and the triads are essentially giving you a shadow, midtone, and highlight all in one. We did that to help you guys out. So that's good training wheels. If you want to learn how to mix colors to make more interesting shadows, or maybe more realistic shadows, that's when you start looking outside. So it depends on what level you're at. But yeah, that'll give you a basic guideline. And you won't get into trouble that way. Like, that's the thing with the triads, right? They're set up so that you won't get into trouble. They give you a safe combo that works. Now, I will say that. Now, having said that, soccer, keep in mind that sometimes the, like the highlight and the midtone and the shadow in those triads might be really far apart, and your mileage may vary. So you may want to do a 50-50 mix between those colors. So like a triad might look like, I was saying earlier, like if a triad looks like this, these 3, then obviously they're very different, right? These guys are kind of close, but these 2 are really different. So if you see that set, like the shadow and the midtone are really different, do a mixture, a 1-to-1 mixture of them in between. Don't just go from that to that. And we did that because I wanted to give people more options. But it does mean that you might need to mix a 1-to-1. One of the triads that's like that is the Imperial Purple Nightshade Amethyst triad. I wanted to give a large selection of purples because I knew those were going to be my only purples out the gate for people to work with, because we didn't get, we released the first 54 first, and then it was a while before we released more colors. So I did purples that were very far apart from each other, but that means when you go to shade and highlight with them, it's too much contrast. So like mix a 50-50 mix of Imperial and Nightshade, for your middle shadow, and mix, a 50-50 mix of Imperial and Amethyst in order to get a nice gradient with your highlight. So you may want to keep that in mind. There were definitely limitations to what we could do in the old days. Well, and we don't want to sit there and make a bunch of paints that are really close together, right? I mean, that would be great for you guys for layering, but it would also mean that there were all these paints that were really similar in our line, and we didn't want to do that. So given the toss-up, the easiest mixture to do is just a 1 drop of this, a 1 drop of that. So that's the only mixing we would ask you to do. Color by Betty Edwards. Thank you, Moon Code. I like that one. Yes. Yeah, Valandar, that's exactly it. Hey, Edric, how's it going? Yeah, liners are fun. They're nice dark shadow colors, and you can do what I did here with them. You can mix them with midtone colors to make good shadows. And I mean, play with it, right? You guys, you don't have to, like, if you've got the colors, just mix them together, see what they make. You know, and if you like it, use it. I mean, I like to talk about realistic shadows because I think those are the hardest to do well. And so I wanted to at least talk about doing a more desaturated shadow for this this project. You can also mix it up if you want to wet blend a little bit of one into the other. All right, so let's get around to highlighting now. All right, so we've got some nice shading down. This is a pretty good start on our shading. We haven't addressed our clear up here that I'm putting successive layers. You can see how long it takes a clear bright to cover. I'm on layer 2. It's going to take 3 layers, and I've thinned this just a little. It's probably 4-to-1 paint to water. But it'll take 4 layers to get a solid coverage on this easily. So that's another problem with the clear brights. So we can talk on a different show more about clear brights and what they're really good for, because there are things they are really good for, but they are not really good for base coating. So just keep in mind that if you grab a clear bright and think that you want that for your base coat, you are letting yourself in for punishment, because you're going to be doing a lot of layers. All right, I just want to set that up to dry while we go into this other thing. There we go. All right, Sagar, see you later. Yeah, we'll be here. We're here. I'm on every day at around 11 a.m. Central. We started a little late, or sorry, 11:30 a.m. Central. I just moved. I'm still adjusting. But yeah, you know, hop back on, do whatever. We'd love to see you. Welcome to the community. Alrighty. Ah, oh no, dropping brush. It's that kind of day. Yeah, resin printer will give you practice figures for sure, as will many Bones Kickstarters. All right, so let's do that thing I just talked about. Let's use Cyan Blue and Surf Aqua, but they're way too different, so we have to do a 50-50 mix of them. 1, 2, 3, and because I like to make bigger paint puddles so that all my paint stays wet for a while, I will be using 6 drop puddles. As will the survival kits. Good point, Valandar. Yeah, now when everybody's got some time, they can all practice all their techniques they've been meaning to practice for forever. There we go. Although I have found that house chores do expand to take up all available time, just like cats expand to take up all available space. So I think house chores and cats have something in common. Thanks, Achilles Blade. I enjoy being on too, even if today was very discombobulated. But I haven't done blue, and I have wanted to talk a while about why, you know, all the things of blue. I like to paint blue. I like blue ambience in general. All right, so we've got a 50-50 mix of our cyan and our surf, which is a beautiful color. Really like that, actually. And yeah, it's a pretty good bridging color. It's not as dark as our cyan, which is over here, so it's noticeably lighter, and it's not as light as our surf. And this should be a good bridging color. And it's 50-50. Now, some colors, when you go to do a 1-to-1 mix, you will notice that one color is very strong and the other color is very weak. And in that case, you've got to adjust your ratio. Like, yellows are going to be much weaker than reds and blues. So if you're doing a mix like that, you're going to have to adjust it a bit. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Chores and cats are both liquid. Or a gaseous. I haven't decided. I mean, cats can teleport, right? And gas could probably teleport easier than liquids. I don't know. This is probably highly hypothetical. So, you want to thin down. Now, the more white or light color you add, the more you have to thin your paint to get smooth blending with layering. So, I'm throwing more water in there. I may need to make this, what I'll often do if I mix a big puddle here and it's too thick, is I will transfer some into the next well, which is why I love my well palette. And then I will continue to thin there where I have more room. And then we can test it to see if it's at the right consistency. There's a couple different tests I use with layering. Oh, you're right. Fluid covers both gases and liquids. Thank you for the physics correction. What I do to test my layering consistency is I do a big Z up here. I use the flat part of my palette. So what I'm looking for is if the paint is pulled really thin, is it almost completely see-through? And where it's pooling, is it nice and thick? And the answer is, well, it's not really, like, I can still see this brush stroke pretty strongly here. I have to, if I pull it thin, I can still see it. What this means is that as I do a layering brush stroke, it's going to be visible. Like, I'm going to be able to see this whole thing. So if you look at this, I want to show you guys this. This is the layering brush stroke, right? If you take my class, I will show you this. If we have a class, if I do a class at ReaperCon on this. So the layering brush stroke is this way. And the reason it's this way is so when you lift up your brush at the end of the stroke, there's a slightly, here, let me. Okay. So you can see at the end of the stroke, it gets stronger, right? That's because that's where I'm lifting up my brush and I'm leaving a little puddle of paint there. So that's the key of what you're trying to do with layering. But for this to work, you need the area where you start your brush stroke to be really translucent, really transparent, so you can get that blend. And you can see where I'm starting the brush stroke, you can still see that brush stroke. So that means that this is not thin enough. And as I showed you here, if you pull it real thin across the palette, you can still see it pretty strong. It is not thin enough for layering. So that's my layering test. These days, I actually, let me see, let me make sure I'm on focus here now again. These days I actually have a good enough feel for it that I do not need to worry. I can just tell when it's in the well whether it's going to be thin enough. And you'll get there. You just take notice, like kind of notice how the paint falls off the side of the well and stuff like that. Yeah, these are 28 wells. Yep, from Cheap Joe's Art Supply. Hey, Nico Fox. We're about to highlight our blue and see if I have created a good color to start with. And I'm adding just a little bit more water, mixing it up, kind of keeping an eye on it. That's a little better. Alrighty. And we're also talking about cats and what they might be. Like solid, fluid, plasma. All right, so once again, remember how back here when I was trying to blend in this shadow, I didn't do an up and down stroke because this is a very vertical area. I did horizontal. So here we're going to do the same thing when we're highlighting. This is a very big up and down area. So we don't want to actually do a vertical stroke, or all you're going to do is see the brush stroke. You can see that in my shadow stroke right here. You can see that I used an up and down stroke for this, and you can see that brush line. Your eye is going to see it very easily because it's the same direction as this. So you want to fool the eye. You want to come at this from a sideways angle. And you want to use the bright layering brush stroke to pull your paint up onto the top of this so that you can build it up to be lighter on the top of the fold. So I'm starting, you can even see my thin demarcation. See, you can see my demarcation line right there. And that is because I'm essentially working with a more opaque paint over the top of a translucent paint. It's not terrible, but you can definitely see it. So that's an example of how that works. Yeah, Everlina, I know. I need to tell him that I push them all the time. Yes, dog father will not be in the cat conversation. I've owned both. Currently, I am owned by a dog. I was previously owned by a cat and 4 dogs. So I've downsized my animal overlords at the moment. Kiri wants to sneeze. Hello. Hi, are you awake? You can keep snoozing. We're still on stream. Go ahead and snooze. She likes to snooze through my streams. She actually was really bewildered when I was moving in because she wasn't getting any of her snooze time. She would get to the end of the day after I was spent all day unpacking, and she spent all day following me around. And she would just like be having trouble keeping her head up even. She'd be on her pillow and you just would see the eyes start to close and her head would droop. All right. So what we have there, so now we can see our artifact. Let's see it. Let's see if I can get a good shot. Yeah, there you go. Now you can see the layers. You can clearly see those brush strokes. This is the really frustrating part of painting with blue. The minute you add more white to it, that white is so opaque. It has such high coverage compared to the blue underneath it that brush strokes just pop out, and it can be so difficult to get them to blend in. So what do we do when we run into this? There are a couple different strategies. We could thin our paint more and try to build it up, and you still will probably see some demarcations. So let's see, I want to make sure you guys can see this. All right, there we go. So what I usually will do as a very fast technique is I will do, it's not really a two brush blend. It's not even two color brush because one of the colors is water. But I'll get water on my brush. I'll squeeze most of it out so that it's still like a wet brush, but that it at least forms a point. I will grab some of my base color layer on the tip of the brush, and I will do a side blend right down that line. And I will essentially utilize the fact that I have water in half of my brush to create a blending zone right on top of that. I'll really quickly take some water in and make sure I fudge out this line so I don't get a line there while it's still a little damp. And that can be a technique. Let's let that dry. So if you want to do a quick fix, sometimes that will work. And you can use a much larger brush for this if you want. I'm using my layering brush, and I probably could use a bigger brush that would carry more pigment. Continue to do that too if we really want to fudge in that line. Bring in a little bit more cyan. And if that doesn't work, let's see how it does. That didn't do badly. Let's see, just catching up on the catversation. The other thing you can do if you're frustrated and you're really like, arg, I cannot get this to blend well, what is wrong with me? It is not you, it is blue, trust me. Is you can grab a little bit of your base color there, and you can layer at it from the opposite direction. And I often suggest this on translucent colors like this that can be so hard to get to blend. There, now you can see that pretty well. So you can see that did blur the line. We have a much better fade here right now. But if I really want to wipe out that barrier, I'll grab some of my cyan, and I don't need to thin it nearly as much as I thinned the color with more white in it, because this is a more naturally translucent color. I just want it to really interrupt. I'm going to put just a little more water in it. I want it to be about 2-to-1. Paint to water. And you can essentially layer in reverse. So instead of pulling lighter color up to the top of the fold, you can pull darker color down toward the shadow. Just get a little bit on your brush. And what you want to do is interrupt a line. So if you see this demarcation of your layering, you want to kind of use a stroke to interrupt that line just a little bit. And that will help to fade in this section to the eye. Make it all blend. Because all we're doing really with layering and blending is an optical illusion, right? If we put it under heavy magnification, we're going to be able to see our layers. But you want that beautiful fade look that I'm getting now. You don't want anything choppy that you can easily see the choppiness of it. So that pretty much faded in and made a beautiful blue highlight here. Beautiful fade. And I make it look easy, but it's much harder. But yeah, but those are the techniques, like, and I probably use the reverse layering a lot more because it's less titchy. You don't have to hit it precisely to make it work. So I will often, if I have too much of a demarcation line, I will take my previous layer and layer it in from the opposite direction to make a beautiful fade. So now that we have this pretty fade, we're going to take it up another level. Looking in, everybody's on cat still. I have started a catversation and it will not die. We're going to go straight up to Surf Aqua now. The other thing we could do if we felt that we weren't getting strong enough highlight color is we could do another layer up on the top of this fold to make this lighter blue color more solid. So we could do another layer up here. Kind of shrink it. Don't get it all the way down to where you just finished a nice fade. Just to make this color a little more solid. And make sure that it's as strong as we wanted it to be. That's very pretty. Yeah, let's not get pseudoscientific on cats. I mean, I'm sure that they would love pseudoscience to be used on them, because then they would remain mysterious forever. And cats like being mysterious. All right, so let's do some surf aqua. Let's add a bunch of white, or water. Not white. Now, these definitely are different, right? If you look at your highlight color and then the surf aqua, there definitely is a big difference here. So, seeing that right now, we know it's going to be hard to blend. So what you might want to do is take just a tiny bit of your previous blue mixture and put it in here. And I recommend this all the time. This is how to create highlights that work together. Whenever you're trying to use one color to highlight another and you're not sure if you're using the right light blue or the right green or the right yellow or whatever, just take a tiny bit of your previous layer and put it into your new highlight color. That puts a little bit of this into that, and that makes them work together. And you can do this even with colors that have nothing in common. You could do this with a medium green and a pale purple. You could get there. It would take you a lot of transitions, but you could get there. So put a little bit of your previous color into your newest highlight color, and that will make them work together better. So, and that is a universal rule for highlighting. That works with pretty much everything. And remember always, when you are using a lighter color, it has more white in it, and you're going to have to thin it with more water to get it to blend. So we will now do a highlight down the top of this fold with the Surf Aqua, almost pure Surf Aqua, just a little bit. When you get to the bottom of a fold where it's going to flare out a bit, you can do a vertical stroke there. The bottom of the fold is a long horizontal, so that's how you can get away with that brush stroke. Plus, you're kind of blending it into these horizontal brush strokes that you're doing here, so it won't stick out too much. And this is where we'll probably glaze after this, like do a big glaze. Because it'll get to the point where we can see some brush strokes and we kind of want the whole thing to blend. And this is where the clears come in really well too. Let me just bring this up. Because it is a lot harder. The lighter the color, the more you're going to be able to see your brush strokes. Make sure you don't come at it from only one direction. You have to come at it from both sides of the fold. The exception to the whole go horizontal if your area is long and thin, the exception to that is if you have a very narrow fold, like if this little one, or even like those little folds that are really, really narrow, where you don't have a lot of room to do horizontal, then you can do a little bit of a vertical thing and it won't matter because the fold is so sharp. So when you see really sharp folds in fabric, like maybe the fabric is meant to be thinner and not quite so bulky, so the folds are very sharp. You can see this on a lot of Tom Meyer sculpts and Dark Sword pieces. Really sharp, small folds, you can just go with the vertical stroke down a long, thin thing and it won't matter. So yeah. So I am seeing some brush strokes here for sure. Let's see if I can get that up to where you can see it. It looks beautiful on the camera. There you go. Now you can see my brush strokes. See my tiny brush strokes. Now, one thing you can do is you could leave these, because if you are if your blending is pretty and you like the look of it, and all you can do is see these little, the only flaw is that you can see some of these horizontal brush strokes, remember that you can leave that as cloth texture. You just need to leave it everywhere so that it's obvious that this is what you've gone for. So, some cloth has more of a weave or pattern texture in one direction, and some of it is definitely more of a crosshatch, finer texture in multiple directions, and some of it, like wool or suede, is more of a pebbly texture and doesn't show the fibers, because it's, leather, obviously suede. But wool, of course, being very nappy, so it's got a soft projected texture. So kind of keep that in mind too. You don't necessarily have to go super smooth. Lacing on the side. You mean this? It's freehand. Princess. I did this on stream. I started as on stream, and then I think I also did a Patreon PDF that shows it step by step. So I want to do a Celtic knotwork, so I showed people how to do that. Yeah, see the texture. I think the texture is pleasant too. And if you want it to be more clothy, you could also do a little bit of a vertical, kind of go crosshatchy with it. But I kind of like this soft side texture. So if you like it, you like it. Awesome. If you are having problems getting it uniform all the way down, then you may want to glaze. So let's see here. Let's put a glaze over the top of it. Now, what clear blue is good for? If you want this to be a very vibrant blue cloak, even more vibrant than it is right now, using clear blue for a glaze is a great way to do that. The clears are single pigment colors, so it's just blue pigment, which means it's the most vibrant color that you can get. And so it is going to make a very vibrant blue. This means that it's really hard to get it to cover, but that means that when you're using it for something like a glaze where you don't want it to cover, it's perfect. So you can thin it down and it will give you a beautiful pop of intense color over the top of your base coat. So let's get it. And again, you can make it as thin as you like, but remember not to let it pool, because when you're working with it so very thin, you can see how watery that is up here. It really is just colored water. I've broken the paint, so I can't let it pool or it's going to dry in rings. So really what you want to do is take a big brush if you're working with big folds like this. So I would use maybe a big flat. And I would get some glaze on there, wipe a bunch of it off, and put a real thin layer, real fast over the whole top of this. Boom. See how much more intense that made that? And the other thing, I might as well put it over the whole thing, is that just like with our glazing down here, it's going to hide brush strokes. So as it dries, it's going to put a filter over the surface. It's going to blend things in. The downside is that it's also going to knock our highlight down a level so that we lose some of our highlight. So we have to wait and make sure that we wait till it dries, because it will lighten as it dries. So it's kind of the trade-off. It's like, if you want more intensity, but be aware that you may need to reapply your highest highlight. And it will take your texture down a little bit and make it fade in so that it's even more, see how it's more blended now. On this side especially, you can see a lot less brush stroke. You can still see it because it's blue, and blue is annoying that way. Trust me, when you're like me and you want a perfect blend, blue is the color you do not want to paint. But let's see here. Let's put a little hole. Put this little hole down here. We have a pit in our cloth. And then we can put in a little more highlight. So we'll grab our teal again, our surf aqua, and we'll put in a little bit more on our high highlights, because the light would come right down that. And we can intensify it down here where it's broadening out. But yeah, so to get a really good smooth transition on blue, you really do, you can see how you really will need to like rehighlight glaze to get a beautiful diffused smooth texture. And that's why doing this sort of thing for competition takes so dang long. A lot of people, somebody asked, my average hours that I would spend on a model, on like a 28mm model. And there's, the gaming model that only takes you a few hours to do a decent job on. There's the gallery model that takes you 8 to 12 hours to do a nice job on for a gallery, something that can be photoed without looking bad. And then there's competition where you're pushing it and you want it to be absolutely brilliant and perfect as you can make it. And this is where you can easily suck up hours of work trying to do a beautiful blend with blue. So yeah, Cornico, it can happen. I mean, you can always reglaze though. I mean, that's the other thing, right? You could highlight, and it probably only looks like you're messing it up because the glaze smooths out things so much, and then when you try to highlight over the top, it's going to look rough again a little bit. So if I wanted to, I could do a bit of a crosshatch to try to take that down, like do a vertical stroke here a little bit. I still want most of my stroke to be horizontal. Just a little bit. But it can get very harsh because very hard to do this, because if you do a vertical stroke too much, then you'll lose it. Like you'll see the vertical stroke and you'll lose your blend. So it's like kind of like that, kind of like pretty. Yay, pretty. I think my blue turned out okay. Once you use medium to make a glaze. You know, honestly, Amperbell, I almost never use mediums on glazes. I prefer to use mediums for washes if I'm going to use them because they help the paint stick in the cracks. But I don't like the texture that mediums give me on a glaze. They put more resins into the mixture and cut down the water. And so they can help you if you accidentally leave stuff pooling. They can help it not to ring. But at the same time, I find that I can't get necessarily as smooth a coat or as thin a layer with them, quite in the way I do with water. It's purely my own thing. It's I'm sure it's just me. I know lots of people like live by their glaze mediums, and they love to use mediums for glazing. But I personally don't prefer them. I like to just use water, use it very thin, and build up coats. There, got a bit of a shadow in there for you guys. So yeah, I just don't like, I mean, and I'll use a medium more appropriate, but I don't like to mess with the consistency of the paint too much. And adding mediums definitely does affect the way the paint flows and dries and all the rest of it. So, you know, it's really your mileage may vary. You could certainly use a medium for glazing for precisely the reason I just said, which is that, you know, if you accidentally leave some to pool, it will keep you from making them, you know, having that horrible ringing effect that can happen when a paint dries when it's really thin. It can rescue you from that, right? So definitely, if you like it, use it. Don't let the fact that I just don't use it affect you. The thing is with Master Series, as far as keeping paint in solution, which is the other reason to use a glaze medium, right? You're thinning your paint so much that you're going to knock it out of solution. That's why it dries in rings if you try to use a really thin paint as a wash. But with MSP, it's still in solution. I like murdered that thing with water. It's colored water, but it's not falling out of solution at all. So I feel confident that I can glaze with it without having that separation. But with other lines of paint or certain other colors that might be heavier bodied, then you may want that glazed medium or that matte medium or whatever you're going to use because it'll keep your paint together. You won't have to like mix it every time you grab a brush full. So that will be the other reason people use mediums to glaze, is that a lot of paint lines, especially really heavy bodied ones, when you add this much water, they're going to fall right out of solution and separate. Pigments are going to float to the top, resin's going to float to the bottom. It's just going to be weird. So that would be another reason to use a glazed medium. So I would, you know, probably choose based on what my paint is doing. But in this case, with this clear blue, it stays in solution beautifully, and so I don't feel that I need to worry about it. Yeah, absolutely, Margaret. You would absolutely use this for dragon wings. Anything big and broad like that, I use this for dragon wings. I usually will set dragon wings up with a wet blend because if they're even bigger, right? They're huge. So I'll use a big flat brush and do wet blending. And then if I'm going to come in with layering and glazing, I'll do that. Dragon wings are some of the hardest things to paint. And it's so difficult to make them look really good. When you do make them look really good, it's super impressive. So it was just time consuming. That's why I usually do dragon wings first if I'm painting a dragon, because I know that I'll run out of oomph if I save them till last. But yeah, so there you go. There's some pretty blue highlighted up with teal, and we could take it up to mint green if we wanted to. Do we have a little time? We have a little time. We're just a little over an hour. Let's do that. Let's do one highlight, really small, with mint green. I'm very much have the blues on my palette today. So mint green. Actually, mint green is not so different from the Surf Aqua mix that we just did. So I may actually just use it and not cut it with another color. But remember, if you want to make sure they work together, you can add a little tiny bit of your previous mix. In fact, let's do that. I advise it, so let's do it. Let's add a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit. And I did a 1-to-1 with this because this color has so much white in it. You can tell from how light it is that has a ton of white. Pink soap is awesome for reshaping and basic cleaning, but if you have brushes that are old and you need to pull paint out of the ferrule, for example, I use Winsor & Newton brush cleaner and restorer. Be careful because it will strip paint off of your brush handle, but it's great stuff if you've got any paint hiding up here that's ruining your old brushes, because essentially I just pour a little bit into one of these wells in my palette, and then I kind of smush the brush and roll it back and forth with a lot of pressure right on here. That works it up into the ferrule, and then when I wipe it on a paper towel repeatedly, I'll see the little gunk and dried paint come out of the ferrule, and then my brush will keep a much nicer point. So I don't actually use conditioner or brush soap on my brushes. I just try to take good care of them and not smush them too far into the paint. I try to load them up. If you watch me load my brush, you'll see that I only dip it usually about, half or a third into the paint. I try to do that. But if I do get paint in the ferrule, or I need to clean an old mixing brush like this, where you can clearly see there's a line of paint right there by the ferrule, so that means there's a bunch of paint up here, and that's why this is so ragged. So when I see that, I will whip out the Winsor & Newton brush cleaner and restore. You can, if you have a brush that's not obeying you very well, it may be due to needing to be conditioned. It might be drying out, especially if you use it for certain things. Primers and some inks can dry out the hairs of brushes. Natural hair brushes, that is, if you're using sables. All right, so a little bit of mint green around this little hole. I thinned this thing down to water, and I'm still seeing brush strokes, and that's how hard it is sometimes to layer with really light paint. I'm going to do a horizontal stroke right under here and try to blend in that area and bring up this edge. And I won't probably take this mint green up very far. I'll just use it to kind of bring up highlights down here, where the cloak would be catching the light more, because it's not right under all this stuff. And it just gives you one last little highlight. Yeah, brush conditioners, or you can just use hair conditioner. Yeah, I can't stand the curly tips, so I use all natural brushes. Unless I'm doing things like I was showing yesterday, where I'm working with mediums that will wreck a normal good brush, and where I don't really need fine control. So a little bit of highlight here, because there's a hole in this cape. And then, yeah, so that's coming up real nice. Yay, pretty blue. I do love blue. I don't paint it enough. I probably should start working on a project with blue in it. Great. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. If you're going to really brutalize your brushes, yes, by all means use brush cleaner and conditioner. Sure. In the normal run of my painting, I just don't beat up my brushes. I tend to take pretty good care of them, so I find that I don't need any heavy duty conditioners to keep them in shape. And keep in mind, guys, that your brushes will almost always fray when they're dried out. What matters is when you put water in them, do they make a really nice point? When you wet them, if they're still coming to this point, no matter how bad they look when they're dry, you still have a good brush. And if it really bothers you that they fray out when they dry, then take some brush cleaner restore, or rather take some pink soap or some hair conditioner or whatever, and just put that in them when you're done with them. Just remember to rinse them out before you start painting with them again. But you want that beautiful point. When you pay for a Kolinsky sable brush, you want this point to last for as long as possible. So be good to your brushes. All right, so I like this blue. I like how it turned out. I got to explain to you guys why it's so hard to blend with blue, but we still managed to get a pretty good blend with our blue. I can still see a little bit of brush stroke, but not bad. If I was doing this for competition, I might turn it into texturing, or I might keep it. It's actually pretty close. It took a whole hour just to do one fold to get it to blend, so that gives you an idea of how challenging blue can be. The more gray or other color you have in your blue, the easier it is to work with, because the more colors you have interfering with that translucency of the blue, the more easy it's going to be to, you already have kind of an opaque color. You don't need to worry about highlighting and seeing so many brush strokes. So using something like Templar blue, for example, is very easy to shade and highlight, because there's green and gray in it, and so you already have something to build off of. It's not as transparent as something like cyan. But if you want that beautiful, vibrant, deep color, then you got to kind of fight with it a little bit. But hopefully these tools will have helped you figure out how to fight with it to get good results. Alrighty. Any questions? Any questions? You guys came up with some really good questions today, so thank you. Because we're coming up on the end of stream. I don't see anything. Not yet. I think that most of my friends use pink brush soap and just use it as a conditioner, but I actually would be tempted to use regular hair conditioner. Yeah, and actually, you know what, Shadow Raven? That's a good... Go ahead, Sharky. Go ask your question while I talk to Shadow Raven. That's actually a good philosophy for any large model, what you say there. When you break down Maldekar into smaller parts, it's not really that overwhelming. You know, you just need time. And that is true of every large model. A lot of you have like the creature caster resins or big dragons or things like that, and they're intimidating, or even a bust. And it really is just break it down into pieces. This is why I paint in sections, right? Anybody who sees me paint for competition, or like the paint along model that I'm doing for my Patreon right now is the Dragonkin that I'm painting with for people, and I'm painting it in sections. I finish the skin. Next time we're going to tackle part of the cloth, right? Then we're going to tackle maybe the chest plate. And by doing that, I break it down into manageable chunks. And then each time I work on it, I see significant progress. And that helps a lot. That's a big mindset booster when you're taking on an ambitious project, whether you're trying to paint a small model to a very higher standard than you're used to, or to paint a big model to any standard. All right, Sharky, what you got? How's California? California's freaking gorgeous. Like the weather. Oh, it's like... It's apparently one of the most comfortable, like as far as temperature-wise, places to live in the world. Although Hawaii scores higher, and I actually agree with that, even though Hawaii is rainier. But yeah, it's like been like 75, 80 outside. It's sunny. We have a beautiful park to take the dog for a walk in. It's 2 parks actually. It's really good. I'm just sad that I can't explore it properly because of COVID. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we went down when I was visiting David before we moved in together. We drove down to Yosemite, and so we visited. I haven't seen giant trees yet. We do need to go see redwoods, like proper redwoods, gigantic ones. I actually have a redwood right outside our deck. Is our 3 redwoods. So it's you would definitely feel like you're in California, but it's beautiful. Yeah, Pendrake, we did blue today. We did blue. I talked about the challenges of blue and some different ways to shade blue and mix shadows for blue and what clear blue is good at, bad at, and good at for, and how to highlight your blue with teals and make it look pretty. And we did all that. But yeah, I'm really enjoying California. I really can't wait for the crisis to be over so that I can properly explore. I would love nothing more than to take the long drive down the coast of California, like just to take a couple days and just do that. I think that'd be wonderful. I would like to properly meet my new state at some point. Yeah, green. Well, you can shade green with dark blues. You can shade it with dark greens. You can add a little bit of brown to it. I was just telling everybody you can use walnut brown to add it into your base color to create a shadow for almost anything. So, all right, great. I think that's about it. Justin, do you have a raid?
Yes, I do.
Who are we raiding?
We're going to be raiding Zambies.
Oh, good, because somebody was already going to go over and watch Zambies anyway. I don't remember who said they were going to head over there after this stream. So that's fantastic. All right, here we are. We're queued up. Guys, everybody have a fantastic day. We'll be back together with Dice Dudes, where we do swirly patterns, or we try and fail horribly. We'll find out. Tune in tomorrow. Have a great one, guys.
Yes, thanks, guys. Also, don't forget today at 4 p.m. Central will be Proctor's show. We will have a special guest for that. I don't know if it's a secret or not, so I'm not going to give it away. We are going to have a special guest. But make sure to tune in and check that out later. We're going to have a blast. I don't know what Proctor is painting, nor do I know really what's going to happen during the stream. So either way, we're going to have fun. Well, hopefully we'll see you guys later. Thanks, guys.